A political earthquake in Parliament. Parliament was momentarily frozen. Every member of Parliament, MP, instinctively turned their heads, utterly unprepared for the unfolding drama. Not even Angela Rayner herself, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, could have anticipated what was about to transpire. A relatively unknown backbench MP, typically recognised for his quiet yet resolute presence, rose to deliver a truth so piercing it cut through the usual political theatrics like a sharpened blade. This was no ordinary parliamentary exchange. It was a live exposed broadcast before a stunned and silent chamber. Rayner under fire, accusations and silence. Angela Rayner, often lauded as Labour's most fearless debater, found herself utterly immobilised as a barrage of accusations rained down upon her with undeniable force. The room, which moments before had buzzed with chatter and bravado, fell into a deathly silence. There was no room for spin, no glib smirks, just unvarnished facts. And in that profound silence, the meticulously polished image of the Labour Party began to visibly crack. What had begun as a routine parliamentary session rapidly escalated into a full-blown political firestorm in less than 5 minutes. The Birmingham bin strike, a national disgrace. As the Speaker of the House nodded towards the backbench MP, most present simply anticipated another round of routine questioning. However, what followed shattered all expectations. The MP immediately launched into the escalating crisis in Birmingham, a city now engulfed by mounting piles of rubbish due to an ongoing bin strike. He wasted no time in pointing fingers, declaring in a voice that resonated through the chamber, "This is no longer merely a local dispute, it is a national disgrace, one that poses a serious threat to public health." Without a moment's hesitation, he then turned his focus directly onto Angela Rayner. Where was the shadow secretary, he demanded, while this crisis exploded? Campaigning abroad for an airport in Pakistan, while British citizens were forced to wade through filth. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. The Union Link, £10,000 donation. The accusation was not merely bold, it was brutal. As murmurs rippled across the benches, the MP remained unyielding, pressing on. Rayner refuses to confront Unite, the very union fueling this chaos. Could it be, he posited, because of the £10,000 Unite paid towards her own campaign? The instant these words were uttered, the entire atmosphere within the chamber shifted dramatically. This was no longer a debate, it was a meticulously planned ambush, and the target sat completely exposed. Angela Rayner, typically renowned for her swift and incisive comebacks, stumbled over her words. "Mr. Speaker," she began, her voice betraying a slight crack under the immense pressure, "I thought the honourable member was better than this." She tried to insist, this is a local matter, and local leaders are managing it. Green Belt betrayal, a housing scandal. However, her tone lacked conviction. Her hands nervously shuffled through papers, and her gaze darted across the room, desperately seeking support. Yet, few dared to meet her eyes. But the MP was far from finished. In fact, he was just getting started. He then pivoted to a second explosive point, Labour's alleged betrayal of environmental promises. "Your party's manifesto," he asserted, proudly touts the protection of the Green Belt, but last week's OB report confirms that Labour plans to build hundreds of thousands of homes directly on Green Belt land. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "Is it not the case," he pressed, "that you have misled the public with your so-called Grey Belt scheme? Or worse, have you misled this very House again?" Rayner attempted to deflect, snapping, "Under the Tories, Green Belt destruction increased tenfold. We prioritise brownfield development." A party unprepared to defend. Yet, her response was noticeably lacking in fire. The chamber recognised it, and even her closest allies understood it. The MP had struck a raw nerve, one that Labour was clearly unprepared to defend. Her explanation felt more like an act of survival than a genuine counterattack. The sense of betrayal was not merely political, it was deeply personal. Voters had been promised environmental integrity, cleaner governance, and a swift responsiveness to crisis. However, what this courageous MP exposed was the stark opposite: the neglect of a national crisis, questionable links to a powerful union overseeing essential services, and a green policy seemingly wrapped in deception. The damage is done, an unwavering speaker. The question on everyone's mind was clear. If Angela Rayner could not answer for these pressing issues, if she could not visit the city in crisis, explain her financial ties, or defend her housing plan, then what exactly was Labour truly offering the British public? That intense 5-minute exchange triggered a powerful domino effect. Social media immediately lit up, and headlines began to formulate even before the parliamentary session concluded. For Angela Rayner, the damage was already considerable. Her meticulously crafted image had been profoundly shaken, not by a political giant, but by a single, relentless MP who dared to ask the very questions the public had been desperately screaming into the void. This was not about cynical party games. It was about truth, accountability, and the uncomfortable reality that some in power might no longer be fit to lead. A political unraveling. As the tension within the chamber intensified, there was a palpable shift in energy. The MP's accusations had not only caught Angela Rayner off guard, but had also significantly rattled many on the Labour front bench. Their customary composure began to visibly falter as whispers morphed into hushed, urgent strategizing. The Speaker's repeated calls for order barely managed to contain the escalating storm. This was far more than just a momentary embarrassment. It was rapidly becoming a full-scale political unraveling. The MP, his tone unwavering, seized the opportunity to dig even deeper. He solemnly reminded Parliament that the public was watching, not just this debate, but also the crucial decisions that would inevitably follow. With a quiet fury, he underscored the grotesque irony of a Labour Party that preached justice while seemingly turning a blind eye to chaos under its own governance. The Birmingham bin strike, he powerfully argued, had become a potent symbol of the disconnect between the Labour leadership and the very working-class communities who had once placed their trust in them. The silence from Labour MPs was utterly deafening. Not one rose to defend Rayner. There were no rebuttals, no interjections, just a palpable sense of unease. Even the Prime Minister observed with an unusual degree of interest, clearly recognizing the profound weight of the moment. Did you know that over 95% of our viewers aren't subscribed to the channel? We totally get it. Life gets busy, and sometimes it's easy to forget. But here's the thing, subscribing is completely free, and it really helps us keep creating the content you enjoy. So, why not hit that subscribe button and join our community? It only takes a second, but it makes a world of difference to us. Thank you for your support. The MP proceeded to challenge whether Labour's financial connections to Unite, the very union at the heart of the ongoing bin strike, had effectively bought the party's silence. His words painted a damning picture, a political party so deeply entangled in union money that it seemed incapable of speaking or acting independently, even when the public interest unequivocally demanded it. He meticulously quoted publicly available donation records, directly challenging Rayner to either confirm or deny the direct financial support she had personally received from Unite during her own election campaign. Rayner, visibly flustered, shifted uncomfortably in her seat but remained conspicuously silent. Her silence, in this crucial moment, spoke far louder than any denial could have. Green belt hypocrisy and voter deception. Then came the next significant blow. The MP explicitly linked Labour's green belt hypocrisy to a broader strategy of voter manipulation. He argued vehemently that the push to build on green belt land was not merely poor policy, it was an act of outright deceit. Labour had unequivocally promised the British people environmental protection. Yet, official data, he asserted, clearly revealed that their proposed housing policies would cause irreversible damage to protected land. The so-called grey belt idea, once a clever and effective campaign buzzword, now appeared to be nothing more than a smokescreen. The MP did not mince his words. This is not planning, it is deception. His statement resonated with profound conviction, eliciting nods from both government and opposition benches. It was becoming increasingly clear that this was no longer solely about party lines. It was fundamentally about truth, integrity, and a profound betrayal of public trust. Unraveling defences, the OBR report. Angela Rayner, visibly struggling to maintain her composure, attempted to regain control of the narrative. She argued that Labour remained committed to responsible growth, that brownfield sites would indeed be prioritised, and that all decisions would be made in genuine partnership with local communities. However, the MP was swift in his rebuttal, citing the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, report line by line. He meticulously exposed the significant disparity between what Labour claimed and what it unequivocally planned to do. He even referenced Rayner's own speech in the House of Commons just months earlier, where she had solemnly promised to protect every inch of green belt land. The contradiction was undeniable. Her attempts to defend herself began to unravel in real time. Electoral reform, a desperate political ploy? And then came the pivot, a tactical move few had anticipated. The MP expertly shifted his focus to Labour's recent electoral reform proposal, a policy bombshell that had quietly, yet significantly, stirred controversy nationwide. With precise timing, he declared, while bins overflow and green spaces are at risk, Labour's solution is to give the vote to children. The chamber erupted once more. The proposal to extend voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds had indeed been met with mixed reactions across the country. Now, it was being framed not as a progressive step towards democratic advancement, but as a desperate ploy for power. The MP openly accused Labour of attempting to manipulate the electorate, particularly after internal polling allegedly showed them rapidly losing support from older, traditional working-class voters, likely a significant portion of your audience in the UK. Youth disenfranchisement, a misguided strategy. Citing fresh statistics, the MP revealed that even the very demographic Labour sought to appeal to, young, first-time voters, were not on board with the proposal. Recent polls, he stated, indicated that a large percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds were actually against the proposal. In fact, many had expressed genuine concerns about potential political manipulation and felt unprepared to vote responsibly. This devastatingly destroyed the core of Labour's argument that youth enfranchisement was primarily about inclusion. "This is not modernising democracy," the MP thundered, his voice echoing across the chamber. "It's rewriting the rules to win." His words now questioned not just Rayner's integrity, but the moral compass of her entire party. The logic gap, ready to vote, but not to serve. Angela Rayner's response, though defiant in tone, noticeably lacked substance. She claimed the reforms were about fairness and future-proofing democracy, but she utterly failed to shake the pervasive perception that this was a political tactic, not a fundamental principle. The MP then crisply reminded everyone that those being given the vote couldn't even legally stand for election or purchase a pint at the pub. Yet, he challenged, Labour wants them to decide the country's future. Where's the logic in that? The ensuing silence was utterly damning. It was unequivocally clear that many in the room had privately asked themselves the very same question. A courtroom drama, dismantling credibility. With each passing minute, the chamber transformed from a political battleground into a veritable courtroom. The brave MP stood as the prosecutor, meticulously presenting evidence, raising piercing questions, and ruthlessly exposing contradictions. Angela Rayner, meanwhile, sat squarely in the defendant's seat, caught in the crossfire of policies and promises that no longer aligned. Her facial expressions clearly betrayed the immense weight of the pressure she was under. She knew this was far more than a routine grilling. This was a systematic dismantling of credibility, layer by painful layer. And it wasn't just her personal reputation on the line, it was the broader image of a Labour Party that had long positioned itself as the champion of working people, yet now seemed more acutely focused on power than on principle. The aftershocks, a national debate ignited. Outside the chamber, the ripple effects began almost immediately. News outlets scrambled to reframe their stories. Social media buzzed intensely with clips of the dramatic exchange. Hashtags related to the Green Belt, Unite Union, and youth voting reform trended within minutes. And most significantly, voices that had long remained silent, ordinary voters, political analysts, and even former Labour allies, began to speak out. The brave MP's comprehensive takedown had powerfully reignited a national debate about truth in politics, accountability in leadership, and whether the opposition was truly fit to govern. The shockwaves had only just begun, and the full force of the fallout was yet to come. As the weight of the MP's accusations continued to settle over Westminster like a thick fog, it became painfully apparent that this was no ordinary political encounter. It was the unequivocal beginning of something far more seismic. The brave MP had drawn blood, not with cheap shots or theatrical stunts, but with verifiable claims, documented facts, and the kind of fearless clarity that cuts through even the most intricate spin. Angela Rayner, once widely lauded as Labour's unshakable deputy, visibly cracked under the intense scrutiny. Her characteristic confidence had noticeably dwindled, and behind her, the benches, once filled with vocal supporters, now resembled silent witnesses at a political crime scene. What had been intended as a standard parliamentary session had been utterly transformed into a very public reckoning. Unearthing financial dependencies, unites influence. But the backbench MP was far from finished. He now meticulously directed Parliament's attention to something many believed had been intentionally buried, Labour's intricately tangled web of financial dependencies. Pointing directly to public donation records, he not only outlined the substantial sums Unite had given to Labour in recent years, but crucially, he highlighted how frequently policy stances adopted by the party appeared to disproportionately benefit union leadership rather than the wider British public. The unspoken truth, a city rotting in its own waste. He then posed a piercing question to Parliament. Can a party that receives tens of millions from a union truly act independently when that very same union is bringing Britain's second-largest city to its knees? The chamber once again fell into a profound silence. The answer hung palpably in the air, unspoken yet utterly undeniable. Even more damning was the MP's revelation that Labour's internal communications had previously warned of a significant public backlash if Rayner was perceived as being too close to unite during the escalating Birmingham crisis. They knew the optics were bad, the MP asserted with conviction. They knew the conflict of interest was real. And yet she said nothing, did nothing, and left an entire city to rot in its own waste. This, he stressed, was no longer just about bins or political donations. It was fundamentally about responsibility, leadership, and trust, the very foundations upon which any serious political party must be built. And Labour's foundations, he concluded, were visibly crumbling. Green Belt betrayal, leaked documents and broken pledges. Angela Rayner attempted to regain some ground, delivering a spirited defence centred on Labour's mission to build a fairer, greener Britain. However, the MP was fully prepared. He produced direct quotes from previous Labour conferences where Rayner and her allies had solemnly pledged never to touch Green Belt land. Yet, he revealed, just days prior, a document leaked from within Labour HQ clearly showed internal discussions about repurposing underused Green Belt areas to meet ambitious housing quotas. This isn't ambition, the MP declared with force. This is betrayal. The phrase echoed powerfully through the chamber, landing like a hammer blow on the floor of the House. At this point, the Speaker intervened, urging members to maintain order, but even he could not fully contain the palpable tension. The political walls were quite literally shaking. The calm dissection, facts speak for themselves. And yet, the MP maintained a calm, steady voice. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Rayner's glaring inconsistencies, Labour's shifting promises, and the blatant contradictions between what they professed and what they were actively doing had been laid bare for all to see. The House watched almost in disbelief as a once powerful figure in British politics was systematically dismantled, not by a rival party leader, but by a principled backbench MP who steadfastly refused to remain silent. The turning point: integrity versus influence. And then came the definitive turning point, the question that stripped away all pretense. Looking directly at Rayner, the MP asked with piercing clarity, "Do you serve the people, or do you serve the interests that fund you?" The chamber was stunned into silence. It was a question no politician ever wishes to answer publicly, precisely because it compels a stark line to be drawn, a line between integrity and influence, between duty and ambition. And Rayner had no good answer. Instead, she deflected once more, repeating pre-prepared lines about fairness and Labour values. But by then, it was demonstrably too late. The damage was done. Scandal spreads, media frenzy and public uproar. Outside Parliament, the media had already picked up the pungent scent of scandal. News tickers buzzed with urgent headlines about Labour's Unite donations, Green Belt hypocrisy, and the controversial youth voting agenda. Journalists scrambled frantically to verify the explosive claims that had just reverberated across the Commons floor. Labour's communications team went into immediate overdrive, releasing vague statements about transparency and respect for local leadership. But none of it could possibly match the powerful clarity and directness of the MP's relentless onslaught. Truth had a simplicity that spin simply could not match. A movement for accountability, the fallout accelerates. Online, the response was even more brutal. Clips of the dramatic exchange spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Hashtags like #RaynerExposed and #GreenBeltGate began trending within minutes. Voters themselves started digging into public records, sharing screenshots of donations, contradictions, and old campaign promises. This was no mere fleeting moment. It had rapidly become a movement. And in the very eye of this swirling storm stood one MP who had, with resolute conviction, decided enough was enough. Westminster rocked, principle over ideology. Inside Parliament, the fallout was visibly accelerating. Senior Labour figures were observed discreetly leaving the chamber mid-session, their expressions tight with palpable concern. Political analysts described the moment as one of the most direct and damaging confrontations in recent memory. And while Angela Rayner remained seated, her political capital was clearly and rapidly draining away. She had survived countless debates before, but none like this, none that left her so utterly exposed, so thoroughly cornered, and so completely unable to shift the narrative. What made it even worse for the Labour Party was the stark realisation that the MP's devastating attack was not rooted in partisan ideology, but in unwavering principle. He hadn't launched into a partisan tirade, nor was he merely playing to the gallery. This MP was simply presenting what many in the UK public had already suspected but had not yet seen articulated with such unflinching clarity. And the profound fact that these truths emanated from within Parliament itself, rather than from a hostile media outlet or an opposing party leader, lent his words even greater weight. It was, quite literally, truth from within the walls of power. Beyond Rayner, Labour's survival at stake. This was not merely a bad day for Rayner, it was a resounding wake-up call for the entire Labour front bench. If they harboured any illusion that they could simply glide into the next general election with vague promises and repackaged policies, they were sorely mistaken. The public was demonstrably watching. Voters were keenly alert, and brave MPs like this one were no longer willing to sit in silence while truth was buried under layers of political spin and calculated strategy. The real question now wasn't solely about Rayner's personal standing, it was fundamentally about Labour's survival. Could they possibly recover from such a public dismantling in front of the nation? And if not, who, indeed, would ultimately rise in their place? The chamber remained deathly quiet as Angela Rayner sat, her eyes fixed rigidly on the bench before her, her breathing noticeably shallow. A searing indictment, Birmingham's plight. Outside, the whirring of cameras and the murmurs of journalists seemed distant, yet simultaneously closer than ever. The MP, now visibly emboldened, savoured his brief moment in the spotlight with an unflinching purpose. He did not rush, instead, he allowed each measured pause between his phrases to amplify his words like gunshots in an abandoned warehouse. He leaned in, addressing not just Rayner, but the entire House. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and measured, "we have crossed a threshold. The people of Birmingham are not pawns in a political chess match, they are our responsibility. Their streets are submerged in filth, their neighbourhoods reeling from systemic neglect. Meanwhile, at the heart of our government, decisions are being influenced not by public need, but by donations. Donations that come with strings." Angela Rayner's shoulders noticeably tightened. A map of Birmingham's worst-hit districts, specifically Northfield, Bourneville, and the city centre suburbs, flashed briefly across a live feed behind the clerk's desk. The stark reality, pictures speak volumes. The MP pointed, almost theatrically, at the screen. Here in Northfield, they waited 9 days for bin collection. Here in Saley Oak, rats roam streets abandoned by local waste teams. This is not hyperbole, this is happening. A photograph was then waved in the air, overflowing wheelie bins, black refuse bags ripped open, stray seagulls and foxes rifling through the discarded waste. The visual impact landed like a physical punch. Even hardened MPs from both sides of the House flinched. It was an irrefutable moment of raw truth playing out in a stone-walled chamber accustomed only to meticulously managed messaging. The political crescendo, broken promises. Then came the political crescendo. "Let us speak of accountability," he declared, returning his gaze to Rayner. "You, Angela, are Labour's envoy, fronting the campaign, campaigning abroad, preaching solidarity on global stages. Yet here, the streets of Birmingham smell of decay and broken promises. When did your vision of solidarity include the traditions of collective responsibility, of being present when it matters most?" Rayner's mouth parted, and she swallowed hard. The benches of her own party rustled audibly, colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. Many were likely asking themselves, would she stand, or would she fall silent? Control over substance, internal directives exposed. He then meticulously retraced the chronology of leaks, reports, speeches, and internal memos obtained under Freedom of Information requests. Lines from a leaked internal Labour email briefly scrolled across the screens, citation pending. Birmingham optics matter. Unite involvement must not be overplayed. The message was unequivocally clear. Top-down directives to minimize the true impact of the crisis had been widely disseminated. It reeked of control, of distance, of prioritizing style over substance. The unanswerable question, people or donors? And in plain daylight, he declared, his voice rising slightly, the choice becomes stark. Will Labour serve the people or serve the interests that fund them? A collective gasp rippled through the gallery once more. Murmurs of agreement, surprisingly, rose from both government and opposition benches. Even Rayner's most ardent supporters were visibly shaken. One frontbencher looked at her with a hollow expression, as if the performance before them had mortally wounded something deeply held.